Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. When I was 10, a pretty regular kid, I found myself home alone for the first time. It was an ordinary day, the kind where you wake up to a bowl of cereal and find the biggest thrill in watching your favorite Saturday morning cartoons. That's exactly what I was doing on that uneventful day when Mom announced she was stepping out for a bit, heading over to Walmart to pick up a few things. Being the brave little soldier I was, I assured her I'd be fine, imagining myself like the cool kids in movies who had the house to themselves. Little did I know my short-lived stint of independence would take a terrifying turn. I remember the moment Mom left. There was a sense of exhilarating freedom. I practically jumped onto the couch, remote control in hand, feeling every bit the king of my castle. I surfed through channels, finally settling on some colorful cartoons that I knew Mom wouldn't let me watch usually. All was well in my world. It must have been around 20 minutes into my marathon when the first knock echoed through the house. It was loud. It wasn't friendly, more like a bang than a knock. I was scared. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but then it came again. It was even louder this time, making me jump. The sound was so big in the quiet house. It was like a reminder that I was alone. I crept towards the door, trying to be as quiet as I could. I looked through the peephole. I saw two men. They were strangers, and they looked at me. I felt my heart racing, and I backed away. I hid in the corner of the living room. The knocking kept going, loud and scary. It was the only sound in the house. It made me feel small and scared. I wondered why they were here. None of the reasons I could think of were good. I was really scared then. I knew they weren't just visiting. They weren't going to go away. I felt small, like a mouse hiding from two big cats. I was so scared I couldn't move or speak. I just listened to the knocking and hoped they would leave. Then the knocking stopped, but the quiet was even scarier. It was like when everything was quiet before a thunderstorm. I waited, my heart beating fast. I listened hard for any sound from outside. I was afraid of what might happen next. It was a horrible feeling, like my stomach was full of ice. But even then, I wasn't ready for what happened next. And then it came, a chilling sound that froze me in my tracks. After the scary quiet, I heard a new noise. It was softer, but it made me feel even more scared. It was coming from the door. It was a weird clicking and scratching sound. The sound you hear when you use a key in a lock. But this was different and wrong. My heart was thumping so hard, it was the only thing I could hear. I was thinking, are they trying to get in? I was so scared I felt like I couldn't breathe. The noise kept going, the click, click, click sound. It felt like it was getting louder, filling up the whole house. I crawled over to the door really slowly. I was shaking. I put my ear to the door. The sounds were louder now. They were definitely trying to pick the lock. I felt sick. I knew I had to hide. I ran to my room and I just couldn't think straight. I crawled under my bed and held my breath. I listened hard, waiting for the sound of the door opening. It was the scariest moment of my life. I was hoping they would give up. I was hoping my mom would come back soon. When I finally heard the familiar sound of Mom's car pulling into the driveway, I crawled out from under the bed. When Mom came home, she saw me under the bed. I was shaking and crying. I told her everything. She looked really worried and she grabbed her phone. She called the police right away. It didn't take long for them to show up. They came in a big black car with flashing lights. It made me feel a bit better, like we were safer now. They were big and wore uniforms that made them look serious and important. One of the policemen walked around the house, checking all the doors and windows. He was looking for signs that the men had tried to get in. I watched him from the window. He moved slow and careful, like he was looking for clues. He had a notebook and he wrote things down as he went. After the cops had finished checking around the house, they came back inside. The one who had been talking to Mom turned to me. He looked serious, but his voice was kind when he said they checked the lock. They tried to pick the lock, but they didn't manage to get it open, he told me. That made me feel a little bit better. They hadn't gotten in. We were safe. He showed me his notebook. There were drawings in it, sketches of the lock and the scratches around it. I didn't really understand what they meant, but he seemed to. They weren't very good at it, luckily for us, he said. He smiled then, a small one, like he was trying to make me feel better. It helped a little. At least we knew now. They tried, but they hadn't gotten in. My brother and I were left home alone one night, a rare occasion since our parents were the overprotective kind. They were going out for some fancy dinner and figured we were old enough to handle a few hours on our own. We saw this as an opportunity, a whole night of unrestricted gaming. As soon as our parents' car disappeared down the road, we raced to the living room, fired up the PlayStation, and jumped straight into Call of Duty. The thrill of the game absorbed us completely. The room was filled with the sound of gunfire, explosions, and the occasional shout as we tried to outdo each other. It was just a normal evening, or so I thought. My bro and I were having a blast, totally in the zone, playing Call of Duty on the PlayStation. The controller was warm in my hands, our shouts and cheers bouncing off the walls. The room was lit by the flickering lights of the TV screen, casting long shadows that danced along with the explosive action on screen. It was just an ordinary night for us. Then, out of nowhere, the sound cuts through the loud roars and booms of the video game. The doorbell. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably just a package, I thought, ignoring the sound, my eyes locked on the screen. But then it rang again, and again. Each ring was like a drop of water falling into a quiet pond, sending ripples through the otherwise normal evening. I glanced at my bro. He was still in the game, too focused to notice the doorbell. The room felt different to me now. We continued with our game, the ringing of the doorbell fading into a distant memory. Suddenly, amidst the war cries and gunfire, I heard a different kind of sound. A hushed voice saying, "No one's home." At this point, I was really concerned, like my spidey senses were on high alert, the game controller slipping from my hands. My brother looked at me with confusion all over his face. I heard the distinct sound of our backyard gate creaking open. It's a sound you can't mistake, the old wood groaning against the rusted hinges. I knew right away that whoever was at the front door was now in our backyard. My breath hitched in my throat, my mind racing. Peering through the window, my worst fears were confirmed. There were 3 guys, each one holding something in their hands. As they moved closer, I realized it was crowbars. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a simple door-to-door sales pitch or some prank. This was something much worse. In that moment, everything in me wanted to run and hide. But I knew I couldn't just do nothing. So, taking a deep breath, I did the only thing I could think of. I flicked on the outside lights. The moment the lights hit the yard, those guys froze. I could see their faces. They were shocked, just as scared as I was. One guy even dropped his crowbar. It clanged loudly, the sound bouncing around in the quiet night. Then they ran. The first guy jumped at the fence, grabbed the top, and pulled himself over. The second guy went next, tripping over himself in his hurry. The last guy, the one who dropped his crowbar, was the slowest. He glanced back once before running towards the fence. Soon, I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore. The backyard was quiet again, except for the normal sounds of the city. But the quiet felt different now, kind of ruined. I kept thinking about those 3 guys, their faces lit up by the backyard light. And just like that, they were gone. They left just as quickly as they had come, leaving nothing but a lone crowbar and a whole lot of fear. In the aftermath, my brother and I were left in the brightly lit house, staring at each other in stunned silence. The glow from the TV screen flickered over our pale faces, the video game's sounds a haunting echo in the background. The house, once filled with the sounds of our laughter and playful banter, now seemed like a hollow shell. With those guys gone, I was left alone in the house, my heart pounding like crazy. I took a minute, then another, just standing there by the light switch, trying to calm down. Once my heartbeat slowed down a bit, I turned off the lights. I didn't want to attract more unwanted visitors. I checked the doors and windows again, making sure everything was locked tight. I even went around the house, turning on all the lights. I didn't care about wasting electricity right then, I just didn't want to be in the dark. After what felt like forever, I heard my parents' car pulling up the driveway. I rushed to the door, opening it before they even had a chance to find their keys. Their faces were full of surprise seeing me up so late, but that surprise turned to worry when they saw my face. I quickly explained what had happened, my words tumbling over each other. My parents' expressions changed from worried to shocked to anger. My mom was on the phone with the police in seconds, reporting the incident. My dad, he went out back, picked up the dropped crowbar. It was Evan's now. When the police came, they checked out the house, asked us a bunch of questions. They took the crowbar, said they'd look into it. After they left, my parents stayed up with me for the rest of the night. Neither of us felt like sleeping. The next day, my dad got a new security system installed. Alright, so me and OB, we were thick as thieves, you know. Just two 12-year-old kids trying to squeeze out as much fun as possible from every summer day. OB was my cousin, but he felt more like a brother. He was just 2 months older than me, and we were pretty much inseparable. That summer, the summer of the incident, we'd somehow convinced our moms to let us have sleepovers every other weekend. It was like hitting a jackpot. It meant late-night snacks, endless video games, and watching WWE and cartoons way past our usual bedtimes. It felt like we were living the dream. This particular sleepover started just like any other. My mom had left to grab some breakfast stuff for the morning. She was always up early, so she wanted to make sure we'd have something to eat when we eventually crawled out of bed. She left us in the living room, in front of the TV, with a stern warning not to open the door to anyone. And my dad? Well, he was at work. He worked for this big IT firm and usually had long hours. OB and I were chilling in the living room, just us two. The TV was blasting WWE reruns and episodes of regular show and The Amazing World of Gumball. We were trying to decide which WWE star would win in a fight against Mordecai and Rigby. I was on the Teen Cartoon Network. OB was all for the WWE guys. While we were arguing over this, the doorbell rang. Now, my parents always told me not to open the door to strangers, but I was feeling big and brave with OB there. So I got up and went to the door. Outside, there was this guy in a suit. He looked pretty normal, nothing creepy about him. So I'm standing there, right? The door just half open and this man outside asking for my mom. Without even thinking about it, I say, nah, she's not here. And then I start to shut the door. But before it can click shut, there's this foot. His foot, shiny black shoe and all, is right there wedged between the door and the door frame. I look up, and he's looking right at me. There was something about his eyes, something not quite right. The dude wasn't smiling at me anymore. Now I'm a kid. But I know that this is wrong. This isn't how people act. And I'm suddenly very aware that I'm home without my mom. My dad's not there, and it's just Obai who's as clueless as me. The air feels heavy, like when you know a storm is coming. I feel a lump in my throat, and my stomach just drops. I try to push the door shut, but the dude's foot is blocking it. And he's a lot stronger than me. I can feel the chill of the door handle under my palm, and my heart is just beating really fast like a rabbit's. I want to yell, but I'm scared it will make things worse. Just when I was about to start panicking, I heard the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. I recognized this sound. It was my dad's old Honda. The guy must have heard it too because he quickly pulled his foot back and started backing away from the door. My dad came in just as the guy was scurrying away. I quickly explained to him what happened, and I could see his face darken. He was mad, not at me, but at the man who had tried to push into his house. He told me to lock the doors and stay inside, while he went out to have a look. I did as I was told, watching from the window as my dad checked around the house. Dad didn't find the guy, but he made sure to walk around the house, checking everything was secure. When he came back in, he gave me a stern lecture about the importance of not opening the door for strangers. I could see the worry in his eyes, and I felt bad for causing him to worry. We and I spent the rest of the day inside, keeping the doors locked. That night, we didn't go back to our WWE versus Cartoon Network debate. Instead, we talked about the stranger and what could have happened. We were both shaken by the encounter. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.